At 9:17 a.m. on January 22, 1943, Second Lieutenant John George knelt within the shattered remnants of a captured Japanese bunker. West of Point Cruz, he observed a banyan tree 240 yards distant through a rifle scope that had been the subject of 6 weeks of ridicule from his fellow officers. George was 27, a former Illinois state shooting champion, and had 0 confirmed kills. The Japanese had 11 snipers operating in the Point Cruz groves, and they had claimed 14 lives from the 132nd Infantry Regiment in the preceding 72 hours. George's commander dismissed his rifle as a toy, and others dubbed it his mail-order sweetheart. When George first uncrated the Winchester Model 70, fitted with a Lyman Alaskan scope, at Camp Forest in Tennessee, the armorer questioned whether it was intended for deer or Germans. George stated clearly it was for the Japanese. Their unit shipped out before the rifle arrived, leaving George to watch others maintain their M1 Garens during the voyage to Guadalcanal, while his specialized weapon lay in an Illinois warehouse. He requested its immediate forwarding via military mail. 6 weeks later, in late December 1942, a supply sergeant delivered a wooden crate marked "Fragile." Inside was the rifle George had purchased with 2 years of National Guard savings. The rifle weighed 9 pounds, with the scope adding another 12 ounces. In contrast, the standard-issue Garand, carried by every other man in his battalion, weighed 9.5 pounds and lacked any magnification. George's rifle was bolt-action with a 5-round capacity. The Garand was semi-automatic and held 8 rounds. Despite Captain Morris's order to leave the sporting rifle behind and carry a regulation weapon, George carried his Winchester. The 132nd Infantry had taken over from the Marines on Guadalcanal in late December 1942. The Marines, fighting since August, had secured Henderson Field but failed to seize Mount Austin or clear the Japanese from the coastal groves west of the Matanikau River. Mount Austin, known to the Japanese as the Gifu, stood 14 feet tall and housed 500 men in 47 bunkers. George's battalion attacked on December 17th. They endured 16 days of combat, suffering 34 men killed and 279 wounded before finally taking the western slope on January 2nd. During this period, George fired his Winchester exactly 0 times in combat. The jungle around Point Cruz was a different challenge. No bunkers, no fixed positions. Just Japanese soldiers, retreating from Henderson Field and dug into the massive trees. Many were snipers, utilizing scoped Arisaka Type 98s. They possessed intimate knowledge of the jungle and mastered the art of waiting. On January 19th, a sniper killed Corporal Davis while he collected water. On the 20th, 2 men from E Company died during a patrol. On the 21st, 3 more were killed. 1 shot through the neck from a tree the patrol had passed twice. That night, the battalion commander summoned George. He stated that the Japanese snipers were killing his men faster than malaria. He desperately needed a proven marksman. The commander asked if the mail-order rifle was truly capable of hitting anything. George calmly presented his credentials, the 1939 Illinois State Championship at 1,000 yards, the state's youngest winner at age 23. He sighted 6-inch groups at 600 yards with iron sights and with the Lyman Alaskan scope. 5 rounds within 4 inches at 300 yards. The commander gave him until dawn to prove his capability. He spent the night meticulously examining his rifle. The Winchester, originally packed in Cosmoline for the sea journey, was cleaned again. He double-checked the scope mounts and loaded 5 rounds of the .30-06, hunting ammunition he'd brought from Tennessee. The same cartridge as the military ball ammo fired by the Garand. At dawn on January 22nd, George moved into the captured Japanese bunker overlooking the coconut groves west of Point Cruz. Intelligence indicated the snipers operated from the large banyan trees, some reaching 90 feet tall with 8-foot thick trunks, offering perfect all-day concealment. George brought no spotter, no radio man, just his rifle, a canteen, and 60 rounds of ammunition on stripper clips. He began watching the trees through his scope. The Lyman Alaskan's 2.5 power magnification was minimal, but sufficient to detect the subtle movement that the naked eye would miss. Filtering out the constant jungle noise, George methodically glassed a banyan tree. At 9:17 a.m., he noticed a branch shift. No wind, just a slight movement. 87 feet up and 240 yards away. He kept watching. The branch moved again, revealing the dark shape of a man positioned in a triple branch fork. The Japanese sniper was facing east, watching the supply trail. George adjusted his scope 2 clicks right for wind, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the glass-smooth 3.5-pound trigger. The Winchester cracked. 240 yards away, the Japanese sniper dropped, tumbling 90 feet through the branches to the ground. George worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, chambered another round, and kept his scope fixed on the tree. Nothing. But Japanese snipers worked in. Pairs, shooter and spotter. If he'd killed the shooter, the spotter was nearby. George scanned the surrounding banyan trees. The low magnification forced a slow, painstaking search through the shadow-filled canopy. At 9:43 a.m., he located the second sniper in a different tree, 60 yards north of the first, positioned lower at about 50 feet up. The soldier was descending the trunk, retreating after hearing the shot and realizing his position was exposed. George aimed, led the movement, and fired. The second sniper fell backwards off the tree, his rifle clattering down ahead of him. 2 shots, 2 kills. George calmly reloaded. His hands were steady. At 11:21 a.m., a Japanese bullet struck the sandbags 6 inches from George's head, spraying dirt into his face. The shot came from the southwest. George rolled left, waited 3 minutes, then inched back to his position. The shooter would have relocated, basic. Sniper doctrine, but jungle relocation. Options were limited. George found him at 11:38 a.m., the third banyan tree in a cluster of 5, 73 feet up. The sniper had merely repositioned to a different branch in the same tree. Fatal mistake. George fired. The third sniper fell silently. By noon, George had killed 5 Japanese snipers. Word spread. Men who had mocked his rifle now asked to watch. But George refused. Spectators drew attention and attention drew fire. After the 5th kill, the remaining Japanese snipers adapted, ceasing all daytime movement. At 16 hours 4 p.m., George returned to headquarters. Captain Morris, his mockery gone, ordered George back into position at dawn. January 23rd began with heavy tropical rain, cutting visibility to less than 100 yards. George waited in the bunker. At 9:12 a.m., visibility returned. He spotted the first sniper of the day, who had smartly climbed into position during the rain. This one was 290 yards out, a longer range, showing the enemy was learning his capabilities. George compensated and fired. The sniper fell. The 6th kill triggered an unexpected response. At 9:57 a.m., Japanese mortars began hitting the area around his bunker, having triangulated his position from the muzzle flash or sound. The salvos crept closer. George grabbed his rifle and ran, diving into a shell crater as the 3rd salvo destroyed the bunker he had just occupied. He relocated to a fallen tree 120 yards north, offering cover and a clear view. The Japanese sent more snipers that afternoon, turning the hunt into a duel. At 2:23 p.m., George killed his 7th sniper. At 3:41 p.m., he killed his 8th, this one concealed 94 feet up, but silhouetted by the changing sun angle. At 17:05 p.m., George was recalled. He reported 8 confirmed kills in 2 days, having fired 12 rounds with 8 hits and 4 misses. Morris ordered him to continue the operation at dawn on the 24th. That night, George cleaned his Winchester. 3 snipers remained out of the original 11, the best, the survivors. He loaded 5 fresh rounds but couldn't sleep. The rain returned, delaying dawn operations. George used the time to move to a new location, a cluster of large rocks, 70 yards south of his previous spot, which the Marines had used as a machine gun nest. At 7:43 a.m., on January 24th, the rain slowed to a drizzle. At 8:17 a.m., George spotted sniper number 9, a soldier in a palm tree, 190 yards out, only 40 feet up. The low position was unusual, offering concealment over elevation, but George's elevated rock position gave him a view down through the fronds. He prepared to shoot, then hesitated. The position was too easy. After 3 days and 8 kills, the survivors wouldn't make elementary mistakes. It had to be bait. George lowered his rifle and methodically scanned for the hidden cover shooter. At 8:28 a.m., he found the real threat, a banyan tree 80 yards northwest of the palm, 91 feet up. The Japanese sniper was perfectly concealed, aiming at George's previous, abandoned position, waiting for him to take the shot at the decoy. George had a problem. Shooting the real sniper would reveal his new location. He decided to use the decoy as a distraction. He fired at the decoy in the palm tree. The decoy fell. George instantly swung his rifle toward the real sniper's position. The real sniper reacted to the sound, turning to face George. The movement gave George the target. He fired before the man could fully turn. The real sniper dropped. 2 shots, 2 kills. But George's position was exposed. He ran, moving east along the rock line, and dropped into a water-filled drainage ditch. At 8:34 a.m., Japanese machine gun fire ripped across the rocks he had just left. He waited, then relocated again, to a shell crater 100 yards east, submerging himself in the rainwater. 10 confirmed kills, 1 remained. At 9:47 a.m., George realized his final mistake. The 11th sniper was not in the trees. He was on the ground, crawling toward George's last known position at the rocks, using the jungle undergrowth for cover. George remained motionless in the crater, the rifle shouldered. The sniper stopped 40 yards from the rocks, searching for movement. At 10:03 a.m., the sniper reached the machine gun nest, taking a position facing east, toward the ditch where George should have been. His back was exposed 38 yards away. George paused. This was the survivor of 10. The exposed position was too vulnerable. Another decoy? He expanded his search and found a second Japanese soldier 70 yards northwest. Behind a fallen tree, 2 men. George couldn't engage both with his bolt-action rifle before they reacted. He submerged himself until only his eyes were above the water, keeping the Winchester vertical to keep the barrel dry. At 10:13 a.m., the soldier in the rock stood up, having seen nothing, and signaled his partner. Both began moving east, 70 yards apart, executing a sweep. George rose slowly from the water. He aimed at the closer soldier, 42 yards away, and fired. The soldier dropped. George worked the bolt, aimed at the second soldier, who was turning, and fired first. 11 shots, 11 Japanese snipers dead. As George retrieved his casings, he heard Japanese voices, a patrol, at least 6 men moving toward the bodies. He dropped back into the cold, muddy crater, submerged up to his eyes. The patrol found his tracks leading from the rocks to the crater. At 10:31 a.m., a Japanese soldier appeared at the crater rim. George fired. The soldier fell. George worked the bolt and fired again, dropping 2 more soldiers. With 3 rounds left, George climbed out, running north. Japanese rifle fire followed him. He sprinted for 90 seconds before diving into a dry shell crater. The voices receded. They hadn't pursued. They were regrouping. George was left with 2 rounds and no stripper clips. At 10:47 a.m., George began walking northeast toward American lines, using terrain for cover. At 11:13 a.m., he reached the perimeter, reported to a Marine sentry and then to Captain Morris. George reported 11 snipers killed with 12 rounds, plus 3 infantry kills in the subsequent firefight, leaving him with 2 rounds. Morris, his sarcasm gone, ordered George to clean his rifle and rest, noting the Japanese were evacuating Guadalcanal. At 14:02 p.m., George was summoned to the regimental commander, Colonel Ferry, who asked one question: could George train other men to do what he had done? George replied that he could, but it would take time.